Hello, my name's Stephen Shaw, and this is my testimony. See, before when I used to give my testimony, it always used to start with, I grew up in a Christian home. But once I grew and matured in my faith, I realized that that wasn't true. Now, I love my mom and my dad, but growing up, we were part of a false denomination, false church. In the home, there was not much Christian going on, but I still knew God was real. Don't know why, don't know how. I mean, I do know why. God was protecting me. God had my heart and my mind. I should be way more screwed up than I actually am. So I have to preface all this because I love my mom, I love my dad, but there was a lot of dysfunction going on, and it only got worse as I got older. I grew up with a lot of verbal abuse. I never went past that, thank God. I got spanked, but, I think that was good for me. But I grew up being called names like retarded and dumb and stupid. So I grew up believing I wasn't smart. And that affected me all the way up to probably 10 years ago. Now again, my mom and I had an amazing forgiveness session, and tears were exchanged, and a lot of healing happened many years ago. So I don't want any of my family to watch this and feel any kind of way, because I love you. And I'm not even going to get into details of disturbing things that happened to me. These little instances that really stuck with me over the years, because that's not the point of my story. The point of my story is how God can transform a heart and a mind. The power that only He possesses that can turn a knucklehead like me into something different. So my mom got pregnant with me when she was 14. Now that says a lot because it was done on purpose. She wanted a baby. My dad was 17. And so there's obviously lots going on there. And I actually just talked to my mom and asked her if she would do a podcast with me. I want to start a podcast, and she's going to be my first guest. And I want to dive into it. I'm going to ask a lot of details, and I want to get real raw because I want to know her story. There's something there. Same with my dad. I want to do that with my dad too, and my sister actually. Start with the whole little family podcast action. So I grew up struggling in school. Mom and dad's arguing and fighting got worse and worse. Turns out I didn't ever know or wasn't aware of it. Again, I think God protecting my heart and mind. The ambulance show up to our house one day when I'm in junior high, and my mom gets wheeled out on a stretcher. Turns out she overdosed on pills. I don't know if that was on purpose or not. That's something I'm going to ask her. But at that point, I was like, oh, something else is going on here. But at this point, I had already started my musical journey. I started playing guitar when I was about 10 years old. And God really used that as an instrument, pun intended, to block out the chaos. Because as my dad would come home every day and they would shut their bedroom door and just argue for hours and hours, I just buried myself in metal mostly. Thank God for heavy metal music. And I really do feel like that protected me. I had a group of friends, I had a band. And so time progressed in that realm for a very long time. Me doing terrible in school, me getting very proficient at cheating. That's how I was able to make it past any grade. But music really became my escape. I was playing shows, like fast forward to high school, playing shows every weekend practically. And at this point, mom and dad get divorced. And I saw it as a good thing because my mom had her issues that she had to deal with. And my dad and I's relationship was always good. And so fast forward high school years, I asked my dad to be our bass player because, hey, we couldn't find one. And again, we had fun together, and he loved rock and roll too. So we rocked out together. It was a very fun time in life, actually. So coming up on the end of senior year, again, cheating my way through school, playing gigs in bars pretty much every weekend, just wanting to get out of school to start real life. I was 100% sure that rock stardom was my future. I would have bet both my arms and eyeballs that I would have been a rock star out of high school. Thank God that didn't happen. We moved to Vegas. Vegas had a better rock metal scene than Orange County did. And so me, my drummer, our friend, my dad, my sister, we all moved to Vegas. Say, let's go. We get out there, play a few shows, but very quickly this all dismantles fast. Band's over. My dad goes back to his working life. I mean, he was always working, but just back to regular life for him. And he was dealing with his own stuff at the time. Friend moves, drummer moves. Now it's just me, my dad, and my sister. So music's over. The rock star dream is dying. And that's throwing me for a loop. And so, you know what? I'm not a rock star, but I'm going to live like one. So, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. First, it just started with drinking and going out and staying out and trying to maintain work whilst, doing that lifestyle. In and out of relationships, in and out of bed with strangers. And then I get introduced to meth. And boy, that was pretty much the missing component. Because then you can party all night and still go to work the next day. Maybe not feeling the best after the first 10 hours, but still functional. Until it became not functional. And so again, I'm not glorifying any of this stuff. I don't want to dive into any of that, the darkness that came along with that. But I meet a girl, I get engaged, we decide to move out of Vegas and move up to Washington. So I move up to Washington, that relationship fails. At this point, my dad and my sister, I moved to New Mexico because we had family there. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to move to New Mexico with my family. And so there, just that same lifestyle persisted. Sex, drugs, rock and roll. Still no music going on because I don't have any band or anybody to play with. Always trying, always attempting, always assuming that this was just a little hiccup in the road to my rock stardomness. But in New Mexico, drugs really became a thing that was no more just, a weekend or a few times, a month kind of thing to, every day I'm smoking it, I'm snorting it, I'm cocaine and, all the stuff. Weed, still womanizing, just dark and ugly. And so things get dark in New Mexico. Again, things I don't even want to get into. My dad and sister moved back to Nevada, and I'm in New Mexico all by myself. I'm working as a bouncer in a bar, and I decided to move back to California. I just felt like I wanted to be back home. That's where I grew up. And so I figured right before I start my last shift, before I move, I was going to just drive through the night from New Mexico to Orange County, California. I do a nice big rail before my shift. Should have waited till after, but I wait until my 8-hour shift that ends late in the night. And then I start driving to California. Terrible mistake. Something 30 hours later after having to stop and sleep in my truck with everything that I own in my truck. As I start my pursuit from New Mexico to California, I remember being somewhere around Barstow, almost there, almost home. And I hear for the first time, I hear God's voice. And he says, "What are you doing with the life that I gave you?" And it broke me. I've had a flash of the last, 5 years. And just completely consumed with everything dark and ugly. And I wept. I wept for hours. Finally get to my grandma's house in Huntington Beach. And I had this massive sleeping pill just saved, knowing that, all right, when I get to California, I'm going to need to take this so I can rest and hopefully just, feel normal for a little bit. So I take this pill, and now I'm laying in this bed, completely wired still, because it's only been a couple days. So when you're coming off of meth, it takes, a good 3 days before you start to feel normal. So completely wired and completely exhausted because of the sleeping pill. And I laid there for probably 14 hours just feeling the worst thing I've ever felt in my life. And at that point, I'm like, what am I doing? So with hearing God and that just terrible 14 hours of darkness that I felt, I was just really determined to change my life. Luckily, my good friend Scott, who was my drummer at the time in high school, he started playing at South Shores Church, which I'm still a part of 25 years later. I started playing on the worship team, and that was great. I really felt like, all right, this is going to be a new change, a new life for me. I was able to just stop. I stopped doing the hard stuff. I wasn't doing meth and coke and crack and all that nonsense. But the girl thing was still a problem. And again, knowing God is there, right? Hearing his voice, knowing he had been protecting me all this time. Things could have been a lot worse than they were. But still no real relationship with him. Just knowing he's there and being content with that enough. Thinking that was good. That was enough. So this was the first step towards surrender. Finally surrender and repentant, a true repentant heart to God. So I'm on the worship team at South Shores. I found a different community, a real community, people with healthy mindsets. And then I remember this one time we go to a men's conference, worship conference, and we're sitting there, same old worship conference. It's like a concert, and the worship team's playing a song. And again, remember, I'm a metalhead. I like all music, but and so worship music's it's not my favorite vibe. And so they're doing their thing, and I just remember getting overwhelmed, starting to get emotional. The song was beautiful. And up until just a few years ago, raising my hands to worship was not my thing. That's vulnerable. That's weird. And so I had never done that. And again, up to just a few years ago, it was never that comfortable for me. God has done a lot of work in me, even just over the last few years. But both my hands go shooting up, just straight up in the air, high as they can go. And I start to weep. And God speaks to me again, and he says, This burden isn't yours anymore. Give it to me. Because I was holding on to a lot of guilt and shame. Remember, I had just come off this, just years, not only growing up in some real darkness, then just diving into the darkness head first for quite a long time. With a lot of hurt, a lot of mess. Carrying this burden of guilt and shame. And him just saying, give it to me, it's not yours. Man, that was real. That was serious. And that was life-changing at that point. So after that experience, though, still just being a knucklehead. Hadn't turned to the hard drugs and all that stuff still, but just, the relationship thing and, all that is just still consuming me and still not living right. Still not living the way God would have me to live. And after a few breakups and some awkward moments, I finally just be like, you know what? I gotta stop. I'm just gonna stop. I'm done with girls for right now. I gotta focus on life and progressing in life. And at this point, remember, I cheated my way through high school. I had no desire for any college or any extra school, and get me out of that nonsense. My brain does not work that way. And again, still believing I'm not smart with my upbringing. So just I have a wall up. And so working job after job that I hate, that's not paying me any money. It was hard. And so I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. And music kind of started trickling back in. I got the worship team. I got other musicians. I started another band and all these things. I'm going up to LA for studio gigs and all this stuff. But at that point, I had gotten close enough to the industry, the LA Hollywood music industry, to know how dark that is. Things that were just like the world at large is starting to understand what happens in Hollywood and what you have to do to make it. And I was like, you know what? I'm good. I'll pursue something else. Hopefully I can still make money with music somehow, but I have no desire for that. That was kind of refreshing because then it gave me an excuse to know, like, okay, it's not that I can't make it. It's just I don't want to. Trying to give up dating, meeting girls, all that stuff, because that's just a huge distraction. And I was doing okay for about 2 months. And then I walk into this diner, 24-hour diner in Dana Point called Harbor House. And I see this brunette just from the back, and not like full back, just her hair. And I was smitten. I knew already. I'm like, I can promise you she's gorgeous. And I was there with a couple friends, and we walk just far enough past so I can actually turn around and see her face. We make eye contact. And I was like, oh, not only just like gorgeous, not only just like, okay, I know she's pretty, but like perfect. And so smitten. And so we sit in the booth right next to her, and I talk to her and get her number and call her the next day because I don't play those kind of games. And she goes on to be my wife. That's Lauren Shaw right now, currently my wife for 20 years. And she's amazing, and it only keeps getting better. But this was a new venture. Now I don't have to worry about the girl stuff anymore because I've got this beautiful, awesome woman. But I'm still struggling with my own. I need to have a family. We're going to build a family, and I can't provide. We're living in Orange County. We don't want to move anywhere else. Working job after job. I know my wife knowing my heart, seeing my hard work. She knew I wouldn't ever be out of work and, leave us destitute. But I was sad to work these jobs I didn't like. And knowing sooner than later, we're going to want to start growing our family, start having babies. And so we go on this missions trip with our church, just a little while into being married. And we go to this orphanage in South Africa. And this was the first time I was ever confronted with this idea of the fatherless. And it changed me. Before that, I was like, adoption is great. You are good people for adopting. That's good for you. But I need to have my own children. After being face to face, with these just beautiful, wonderful kids, it really changed my heart. And that was the moment. I literally on the way home on the flight, I lean over and tell my wife, I'm like, hey, I want to adopt someday. And she was like, me too. And so that was really cool. Come to find out, years later, she had prayed on that trip on the way there that my heart would be open to adoption because she was and she knew I wasn't. And we'll get into why that matters in a little bit if you don't know me at all. But in 2006, I'm working at the bank as a teller. Again, I'm generally a joyful, happy guy. And so I'm not Eeyore moping around all these jobs that I don't like. Still good attitude. I'm still, happy and all that. But just feeling like, I'm going from this, knew I was going to be a rock star to now just working at a teller in a bank, So the only thing, I remember standing at the teller station. It's a slow day. Feet are killing me because standing sucks. And thinking, God, I only know how to do two things. I'm only good at two things. I'm only passionate about two things. And that is working out and music. Music's not paying the bills, and I don't see how it's going to. Working out, I could train people. And so I start creating business cards, and I start advertising myself as a personal trainer. And that was the birth of FitCore. FitCore I started in 2006, pretty much took over Ladera Ranch, and I was driven to make it work. Okay, I took all my natural anger problems that I've been dealing with for years and put that energy towards saying nothing's going to stop me from making this happen in my life. I need to do this or I'm not going to survive. So I start training people before the bank. Sometimes even for my lunch break, I'd take a client, training people afterwards. This went on for about a year until I finally took the leap of faith and said, you know what, I'm quitting the bank. I'm going to put full-time effort into training. And I did. And it blew up. And I was training real solidly for 14 years. And it provided us a home and a family. Now, in that time, my wife and I started trying to have babies. And it wasn't happening. And months would pass, and then years would pass, as we go get all the tests and try to think all the things we can do and all these remedies that people talk about, and it's just not happening. So finally we said to ourselves, why aren't we just going for adoption? And so we start that process, and that's a long process, and it's scary and it's unfamiliar. And then we're presented with the various options of, well, IVF and, all these other things you can do. And so when we decided to just dive in and say, well, we're just going to start the adoption process because both of us wanted it, and why are we waiting? I remember reading this book, and the quote that just stuck with me and I really think changed both of our hearts and minds real fast. It said, do you want to be pregnant or do you want to be parents? And I just wanted to be a parent. I love little babies. I know, look at me. I look like a tattooed freak, but just give me a baby and a couch. I could be there all day. I mean, that just does something to my heart and my soul. And so I wanted to be a dad. And so we start that process. And again, this isn't going to be the testimony of our adoption story, which is beautiful, remarkable, and wonderful. But end of the day is we adopted 2 babies from birth. They're now our beautiful, sweet little kids. They are my hearts, Eli and Ivy. Yeah, they are now 9 and 12, and they're just awesome. I'm just trying to give you the full scope, a little glimpse into my world. And again, this is about Jesus and the power that he has and has had in my life and now our lives. But okay, so 14 years straight, business is going good. I start training at a addiction recovery place. It's an all-female drug abuse addiction recovery board. I had no idea what this was. I knew, rehab, of course, we've all heard of that. So I go in there and I start doing their workout groups. They needed a workout person. Hey, that's what I do. Let's go. I start training, and then I find out they have music therapy. I'm like, what's that? Start doing that there. Word of mouth goes, people graduate the program or employees leave there, and then they say, hey, they referring me to these other places. And the next thing I know, most of my time is taken up doing the music therapy or workout groups at other centers. That was about 8 years ago. And, fast forward to now, I'm a certified counselor, and I run all kinds of groups. Not just music therapy. I don't do any workout groups except for one corporate account that I've had for 18 years, and I'm very appreciative of them. But 99% of my day is meeting people at a very raw and real level. Now, what that does bring those, we got relapse prevention and motivation to change and mood regulations and connections and just so many different varieties of groups that I feel so privileged and comfortable to lead now. Remember now, this comes from many, many years of me feeling very dumb and being very sensitive to feeling like an idiot. If I feel like an idiot, just the fear of I might feel like an idiot or look stupid was crippling. And so that took a lot of time to get over. And like I said earlier, I've only gotten over it in the past decade. Finally, God snapped it out of me. And so now being able to sit in front of very judgmental or tired or angry faces every day and having to win them over hour by hour for 8 years, it's really helped become, I'm literally not afraid to be in front of anybody and talk to anybody at this point. And that's actually very freeing. But it came with a lot of hard work and very uncomfortable situations. But I need to rewind a little bit because this is only all possible because when I was about 30 years old, I'm 46 now, I'm 47 in just a few months, May 15th. When I was 30 years old, it finally hit me. I need to read the Bible. I'm claiming to be a Christian. I'm even fighting for the faith, and I have no idea what I'm talking about. I've never read more than a couple chapters at a time. Tried over and over again to read the Bible cover to cover. I make it through a few chapters in Genesis and then forget or move on. And it really felt the conviction. I'm like, I'm claiming to don't live for this. I don't even know the stories. I know what the pastor from the pulpit is saying. That's it. So I buy a new Bible, and I'm committed to read it cover to cover. And I take it with me everywhere. And I read and I read every chance that I get. If I got 5 minutes, I'm going to read for 5 minutes. And I did. I read it cover to cover in a year. Didn't follow a reading plan. I just read it as much as I could, as often as I could. But something happened, or probably around 2 Kings, Old Testament still. I'm laying in bed reading, and God spoke again. But first, he made me feel the weight of his wrath and hatred of sin. Now, as much as I had cleaned up my past, and as much as I was trying to do good, I was still living a very shallow, in namesake only Christian life. Yes, I'm on the worship team, and yes, I'm involved with all this stuff, but still, it's not about that. It's not about what we do. What we do means nothing if it's not backed up by a true faith and relationship with Jesus. I feel that weight. I get terrified. I probably turned stark white, and I was like, oh my God, I've been doing this wrong. Literally, God, supernaturally, took the idea of Christ out of my mind. There was no Jesus for a minute, and I was just under the weight of my own sin. And then God spoke again, and he said, don't forget my son. And it was like, oh, the grace of Jesus. It had never felt so sweet. It had never felt so powerful and so appreciated and needed. That was the biggest life-changing moment I had ever experienced. It reminds me every time I sing or think about Amazing Grace, the lyric that says, how precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Man, that never rang more true. And so from that point on, I was determined to have a relationship with Jesus and grow closer to him. And then in the very same moment, like instantly, I was like, I see so many other people living the same way that I do, and that just lit a fire under me. If anybody knows me for any amount of time, they know my life is built around sharing Jesus. Like, I can't shut up about him. My music is about him. My blogs are about him. I started a texting ministry called Misfit Ministry that's ended up being online, and now I have a Bible study. All these things. 15 years, 16 years now, almost 17. But grace became personal, and I so badly wanted other people to experience that. So now back to this journey. I'm already on this life-changing, transformative relationship journey with Jesus through all these professional work and growing the family and all this stuff. You know, I've fallen in love with helping broken people because I know exactly where they came from. I grew up in that broken household. I had my own struggles with it all, and I love all of them. But God was shaping my calling. Now, before I get to the good, glorious stuff, the attacks really started coming. And anytime you start walking towards the light, the darkness is nipping at your heels. And it got to me. It started with COVID. So I ended up getting COVID pneumonia. I think it was 2022, I believe. I tried to fight through it for 12 days at home. I was just resting and taking vitamins and thinking, like, I could do this. I don't go to the doctor, so I'm like, I could just rest this off. Well, breathing was getting worse. I couldn't walk to the bathroom without having to take a break for 30 seconds first. And so finally on a Friday, I go in, I'm like, I know, let's go to the emergency, and it's just maybe they can pump me through steroids or give me an inhaler or something. I ended up staying in the ICU for 10 days because my blood oxygen was at 72%. That's like brain damage status. So I ended up being there for 10 days. And in that 10 days, I wasn't scared. I was at peace. Now, talk to my wife, she'll give you a very different story. She was terrified. The doctor was basically telling her, get ready because he's probably going to die. Meanwhile, I'm just sitting there being like, okay, I get to watch TV and eat food. I'm good. And they have the good ice too, like that little crumbly ice in. Yeah, I have a cranberry juice and a cup of ice. Oh, that was fun. Anyways, I really felt God's, like, this has been like 16 years of hard work, 12-hour days, 16-hour days sometimes. And it was like, God was just like, rest. And so I took it. That's exactly what I did. I missed my family. I missed everything, of course. But I got to see so many things and learn so much from that experience. I would not take it back for 1 second. I first learned how much my church has got my back. I work for myself. I don't work. I don't make income. They make an announcement at church. And this was still just me. At this point, I think, I was the youth worship leader. Again, I had played many roles at church in 25 years. Youth worship leader. And so they, people knew me, but I still felt like an outcast. My ministry is called Misfit Ministry because I never really felt like I fit in anywhere. But our friends start a GoFundMe page and the church starts donating. and the number skyrockets. And so that's what really helped me to just be at peace and just be able to rest. And God, that was such an amazing, like, God-centered and the way God wanted the church to be, of coming alongside people who are hurting to help us. And our church is so good at that. But that was the first glimpse I really got to experience it firsthand, and I'm so thankful for it. Just our church loves people. So being able to have that cushion and being like, okay, good, I can just rest without stressing. But all that was very humbling. I've never once felt vulnerable in my life as far as I couldn't physically protect myself, but, being in those moments. And so then even after the hospital, that was just the beginning of the healing journey. I had to come home with a wheeled oxygen machine, and I was on that for a while still, so it was like a good 3-month chunk out of my life taken. I leave the hospital 43 pounds lighter than I went in. I get out of the hospital. I'm not sure when I'm going to be able to sing because I can barely still, move much. Still not working. They have to replace me as the worship leader for the youth. And so, I understood that. And so I let that go. And so now when I'm finally, I'm getting a little better and I'm able to move without oxygen and, just healing slowly. I remember now just joining my wife for our 11 o'clock service on Sunday mornings. She's up on the stage singing with the band. I'm just sitting there, first time in 16 years at that point of not having something to do on Sunday mornings. And it really felt like God just telling me to wait. Just keep resting. Just wait. And I did for a little while. Then I get this opportunity to lead at another church thinking like I need to do something. I felt like I had to prove something to myself. Like I can still do this. Like this didn't wreck me. And so I started leading at this other church and potential that it might we were going to move up there. It was in Cerritos. And so we're going to change our whole life and church family and all this stuff. But after 6 months of that, it was just still like, this just doesn't feel right. And so I come back to my church and again, I'm just sitting there on Sunday mornings, not doing anything, just feeling kind of weird and lost. But then eventually start playing on the worship team and start leading with my wife. And that was super cool. But there was still a lot of growth to come. So still just plugging away. I'm leading these groups. I get my counselor certification. All these good things are happening. But at the very same time, I literally start to believe that I'm not saved. Financially, not doing well. And I feel like everything I'm doing I must just be out of God's will. Therefore, I don't think I'm actually a Christian. But I was so dedicated and knew that the truths of Jesus were real. I remember talking to God saying, you know what, God? I don't care if I'm not actually saved. I understand your ways are bigger than mine and you're always good no matter what. I'm going to dedicate my life to sharing and doing what I do still, even if I'm not saved. I don't care. That's fine. Ridiculous, I know. But that's just where weird, just attacks from the enemy. But at the very same time, I felt very worthless in a sense. Be like, well, what's the point of anything then? It was just a very dark, and I can't even explain it. But now coming out on the other side, and this is just a few years ago, coming out on the other side, it really was a growing test from God. Yes, attacks from the enemy, but what they meant for evil, God meant for good. I understand that more than I think most people do now. And really, all these emotional attacks started when I started the Bible study at my church. I've been doing it for May 1st will be 4 years. And the second that started, all the attacks started coming. It's not a coincidence. So when you start moving towards Christ, just be prepared for the attacks and lean on him, call on him, and don't be a knucklehead like me. So coming on the outside of this, I start to get tired of leading groups, trying to point people to the light without being able to talk about Christ. That's really hard. Here's all this positive affirmations without being able to mention Jesus. And I can't mention Jesus because all these places are secular, most of them anyways, because they're insurance based. And so you can't get religious and can't push, any kind of God on them. It's all higher power talk. And that gets really old really fast, especially when you know the truth. It had been weighing on my heart for 3 years. You need to start something, a recovery service or something. And so, man, I had went through the whole process of planning a church. I was thinking of starting an evening service at my church. But again, I'm just a knucklehead misfit. Who am I to start the South Shore's evening service? We had one years ago, and that was awesome. And so nothing was feeling right. And then finally, we had some recovery people come. We had this big group of recovery people. It was really specifically this one Sunday. About 14 of them were there, I think. And it was one of the best Sunday mornings I think our church has ever had. The Spirit was there and people were energized. And our church got to get a glimpse of this world of addiction and mental health. And at this point, people had, knew what I was doing, what I was working for. I was like the guy, the reference guy to call, and then when their uncle and their brother and their people are struggling, where should I go? What should we do? And so God was laying out the framework. And so I decided, I'm like, you know what? We need to start a recovery service. And everybody's on board. And this is just a few months in the making, but it's like I finally now get to have a place to say, yes, we're all broken and enslaved to sin, and Christ is the answer. Nothing else. You can have all the higher powers you want, but eventually you need to repent and submit under the highest power, and that's Jesus alone. And so now we get to do that. It's called Rhythm of Recovery, and that's what I've been doing now through South Shores for the last 2 months. Started planning it in October of 2025, launched in 2026, the first week or second week of January. Teamed up with some awesome men that are heavily involved in this world too. And so now to just be on the other side and seeing like this is all led up to all the darkness, all the brokenness, all the healing, all the revelation has led to this moment, and it really feels wonderful and powerful. Now, there's a lot not said in this testimony. There's so many other times God has spoken to me very powerfully, and it just always just leads to tears and wonderfulness. And I'm doing this because I know I'm probably going to start doing my testimony at various groups, including my own. But this, without making it too long, I just wanted to share how God has relentlessly pursued me in my life. And if he can build and rebuild my life, anyone else is possible too. Your story is not over until you stop breathing. God is good all the time for those who love him. And I'm sure, and I'm really depending on when I share this in person, and I'm hoping to do it more than once, that the Holy Spirit really leads me to share various different details. And so as you see me being advertised to, speak other places, to come and listen, because I know the Spirit's going to lead me in different directions, different times, to share various parts and dive deeper into certain themes and topics. But all with the focus of God is good, Jesus is so wonderful, and the Holy Spirit is very powerful. But I love you guys. Thanks for watching.